We all carry wounds, some loud, some silent, some from childhood, others we can even name. But what happens when we take the time, sometimes years, to untangle them at the root?
My partner is the one who said, look, people don't really wake up 3 times a week screaming. You better go get some help. They were violent. There were 2 or 3 people, men, women, didn't matter, running after me, trying to kill me. And I would fight them, but then they would inject me with some chemical that would take my strength. And then I knew I was going to be destroyed, and I would wake up screaming. And as a 2-year-old, I watched that. What is it that's inside of us that comes out in terms of anxiety that doesn't even make sense with our life, which may be going along very well. And you kind of know something's in there that you're not completely processing. My whole life made sense. I didn't understand what was chasing me. I didn't understand any of it. And it gives you such a sense of control and mastery. If you feel better as a person, you can bring so much joy and love and stability to other people. So it pays forward.
Welcome to Rosabel Unscripted, the podcast where authenticity meets real life stories. I'm your host, Rosabel Zohfeld, and in each episode, I dive into unscripted conversations about personal growth, life challenges, and the experiences that shaped us. From heart-to-heart chats with inspiring guests to raw moments of self-discovery, I am here to share stories that connect us all. Whether you're seeking motivation, healing, or simply a dose of real talk, you are in the right place. So get comfortable, tune in, and join me on this journey of transformation, empowerment, and meaningful conversations. This is Rosabel Unscripted. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Rosabel Unscripted. This is a show where we sit down with people who aren't afraid to peel back layers and tell the truth, messy, bold, and deeply human. I'm your host, Rosabel Zohfeld, and today's conversation is one that I've been looking forward to because we're diving into something rarely talked about openly and almost never from this perspective. We all carry wounds. Some loud, some silent, some from childhood, others we can even name. But what happens when we take the time, sometimes years, to untangle them at the root? Today's guest, Joan Peters, did just that twice. She didn't just go to therapy. She went deep into the world of psychoanalysis, the kind of healing that asks you to show up week after week, year after year, and to sit the parts of yourself most people run from. Then again, and she wrote about it. Wow. Her new memoir, Untangling, a memoir of psychoanalysis, first of its kind, is a personal account from the patient's point of view. It's bold, poetic, and reveals what it really like to uncover the subconscious, one dream, one memory, one silence at a time. Welcome, Joan.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad you're here as well. This is such a personal story. I want to know what made you want to write a memoir about your own psychoanalysis.
Well, I have to say, it is motivated by I felt for the skill and brilliance of these analysts, these 2 different analysts who saved my life, really. I mean, the first one, I was at various times suicidal in my misery and had no idea what was wrong. I feel like I learned so much, not just about my own life, but about psychoanalytic thinking that can apply to everybody, that we can bring into our own lives if we're willing to track a feeling, a problem back root. And that's really, I think, available almost to everybody to some extent. It's nice to have support when you're doing it. So I really appreciate having had wonderful analysts. I stumbled into psychoanalysis like everybody. I mean, I never even heard of it, really. I mean, I knew there was this man named Freud but it didn't seem to be in my neighborhood, and it wouldn't have occurred to me. I was aware that there was something wrong with me. I felt I wasn't quite like other people. I was too haunted, and the haunting came about at night. In nightmares, in restless legs, only at night. In the daytime, my life was really enviable. I mean, it was everything I had worked really hard for and gotten. I was achieving everything I wanted, had a wonderful partner. My partner is the one who said, look, people don't really wake up 3 times a week screaming. You better go get some help. And I went to somebody I thought was just a therapist and began to talk with her. And little by little, I told her about it was the same nightmare in a slightly different theme, same theme, different particulars. And little by little, she began to realize and made me understand that this wasn't going to be just therapy. I was lucky because she was just in training to become an analyst. And she offered me, I was going to be her first real patient. And she recorded our sessions and talked with the supervisor about each of the sessions she did with me. And I got to go for $25 a session because she was a student, really. It worked magnificently. I felt like I was getting help from two analysts, from her and her supervisor. And she began by talking just about my ordinary problems, with my work, with my friends, whatever. It kept going back to these nightmares that didn't make any sense. They were violent. There were 2 or 3 people, men, women, it didn't matter, running after me, trying to kill me. And I would fight them, but then they would inject me with some chemical that would take my strength. And then I knew I was going to be destroyed, and I would wake up screaming. And it didn't make any sense. Nobody had ever been violent with me in my life. And I thought I had a kind of ordinary life. But this was something, there was also a feeling that I was much too anxious and fearful a person. Well, it turned out she went for the dream and kept at it and kept digging deeper and deeper. And it took a long time. It took about 6 months. So this is different from problem solving. Let me help you solve your problems at work. Let me help you solve your problems with your marriage or your friends. This was more than that. And she needed a bigger toolbox. And she would ask me questions about my childhood, and I couldn't answer. I didn't know. I only knew about my life after 5 years old. And before that, my father had died when I was 2 and my brother was 7. And my mother didn't have a lot of money. She had to she was 26 years old with 2 babies and a dying husband and no money. And she had to do it all herself. And obviously she wasn't very available as a mother. And then when my father finally died, she finally told me about this. I didn't know about this. I knew vaguely I had a father who died, but we never spoke of him because when she married another man when I was 5, he didn't want anything to do with her past. She sealed it up in the old apartment, our little 3-room apartment, moved to a new place, didn't even bring one item of clothing from the former place, the former apartment. So it was not available to me. But this was really a big event in a child's life, the loss of a parent, and also watching a parent grow sicker and sicker, wasting away and dying over a period of a year. And I did notice it, of course, and so did my brother. And we carried it with us into our lives, but not consciously. And that, I think, is what a lot of people do. There'll be an area of family life or family history that's not talked about, that you sense as a child is taboo. You don't ask questions about that. And it stays with you because something is not getting worked out and processed and understood. And children need all of that in order to grow in a healthy way. And I learned when my analyst would send me into my family to interview people, even people I had never met before. My dead father's family, I would introduce myself, hello, I think you're a relative of mine. Would you meet me and tell me something about this time period? And I learned a lot. And little by little, she deciphered the dream and specified in my mother's telling of the story how she would have to give my father morphine injections when he was in terrible pain. And as a 2-year-old, I watched that. And I put together 2 and 2. She's giving him injections and he's dying and wasting away. The injections are killing him. Oh my, what if she injects me and kills me? And I said, that's silly. This is my mother. She took care of us. She wouldn't kill me. And she said, well, that's not the way a little child thinks. That's why we have fairy tales. It's all very black and white. It's very larger than life. It's villains and angels. And she told me this. I didn't even think it was true in my conscious mind. And guess what? My nightmares disappeared. And that was my introduction to the unconscious. That was my introduction to what's deep inside of us that comes out maybe in stomach aches, headaches, bad dreams, whatever. What is it that's inside of us that comes out in terms of anxiety that doesn't even make sense with our life, which may be going along very well? And you kind of know something's in there that you're not completely processing. You don't know, and sometimes you can't even reach it. I didn't know all of this, and that opened the door to my entire past. So it was like almost a Sherlock Holmes mystery. She would send me to interview my mother again. My brother and I would put our heads together and figure out what happened. We would discover the few little photographs, maybe 10 photographs that my mother had of this early life. And we formed a picture of our childhood and began to understand what had so affected us.
Joan, I have a question. So when you first went to this therapist, did you know that she was particularly working with psychoanalysis?
No, most therapists, or I should say most psychoanalysts, can do ordinary therapy and do. But if they see a patient who needs more, or a patient is referred to them or comes to them needing to really untangle something that's too complicated for working out everyday problems, then she will use her psychoanalytic training or his psychoanalytic training and bring it to bear. So she, I think, began with me assuming she was going to do therapy. And then little by little, she began to see the complicated background that I came from and trauma, that obviously on some level I was terrified by watching my father disappear little by little. And he could no longer, at one point, my cousin told me her mother told her that I went in to see him and he threw a shoe at me. He thought I was a cat. He was on morphine and he was hallucinating. These are terrifying things for a child. And my mother, who was so young and just trying to keep us afloat, really, she didn't really have the understanding of what to do. So what she did is what a lot of mothers and fathers do, is just say, we're moving on and everything's going to be fine from now on. And it was, in a way. I mean, it was fine in the sense that she went back to work and we had food on the table and she found a new partner and he was a nice man, but it wasn't. You don't just walk away from an early childhood of terrible loss and disappointment and fear. And my brother and I didn't even feel we could talk about it until I began an analysis, and then we began to really talk about it. It's like letting ghosts out of the closet. You can breathe. You can begin to breathe. My whole life made sense. I didn't understand what was chasing me. I didn't understand any of it. And it gives you such a sense of control and mastery, a complete puzzle. I didn't even understand my own behavior sometimes. Why did I get so mad about that? Why didn't I want to try something new? These things that were really based in fear and trying to control my world, I didn't need them so much anymore. So psychoanalysis was right for me because we really were dealing with trauma and a past that had to be deciphered. Many people have more access to what happened to them, or it happened to them a little bit later in childhood. What happened to me was pre-verbal. I couldn't go to anybody and say, my uncle got drunk and beat us up. I couldn't express anything that was going on. So if your childhood has some trauma in it, but you are 8, 9, and 10, 14, 15, 16 when it's happening, hopefully you have a base in love and closeness that you can bring to the event. And you have a parent or an uncle or an aunt or someone you can tell, and they will comfort you. They will help you understand it. But when you're very, very little, even my brother, who was 7 at the time, he didn't really have the language or the maturity to say what happened to him.
Right. So the brain is still developing, right?
That's right.
And then the other thing is our brains don't distinguish between what's real and what's not, what's fiction. So it's in a constant search for what makes sense, right? So our brains are unique, very, very interesting. One of the things I noticed is that your memoir seems to span 2 major chapters of your life, one on your 20s and another one in your 60s. And I wanted to know what changed during those 2 time periods. What was the difference?
Well, in fact, I think the first psychoanalysis in my 20s took me as far as I could go. There was, your 20s, you're not totally mature either. But what it gave me was, after this analysis, I met my husband and I'm still married to him. So I found my partner for life, which is pretty wonderful. I really settled into my vocation, which was, I was a college professor and a writer. I knew who I was and I knew what my past was, and I was able to relate to my family. Because before then, I really had almost nothing to do with my family, because my family was sort of like where the ghosts were, where the fears and angers were. And that took me a long way. Then by the time I was really getting ready to retire from my career and my daughter was a teenager, in a way, my everyday life took me once again. I was finding that, well, why am I still struggling with certain things when I've already been analyzed? So, for example, my teenage daughter was very challenging in many ways, and I would give in to her all the time because why? Why did I give in to her? Well, it turned out when I really, really started working in my second analysis, I understood I was afraid if I didn't give in to her, she wouldn't love me anymore. And that reflected back into my relationship with my own mother, who kind of was a figure I really was never sure she did love me. She wasn't very close. She wasn't very, when I was a child, she never hugged you or kissed you or did those things that mommies do that we love and need. She was, I think, really traumatized herself. So it was very difficult for her and me. And I just was so frightened that everybody I loved would leave me if I didn't give in and give them what they wanted and put them first and call them all the time or whatever I thought they needed. And that opened up another door to how I still carried the emotional wounds of deepest childhood. And they were coming out, and I noticed them around me. I was very frightened. Oh my God, I'm going to retire. I won't exist. If I'm not Professor Peters and I don't have this great job, I will disappear. And that's what took me to a second analysis. And then that one went, by the time that was completed, and I started writing the book. I started writing the book 2 years before it was completed. I was so excited by what I was learning. That was a very different kind of analysis. It's called relational analysis. And it's defined by your relationship with the therapist. And the idea is that that relationship contains your whole emotional history. So whatever is unresolved for you is going to come out in how you relate to that therapist, how you bond with her or how you don't bond. And I really recreated the relationship I had with my mother with this new therapist, meaning it was very distant. I wouldn't let her love me or care about me. We were just coworkers figuring out the psyche of Joan Peters. And that went on for a couple of years. And when I did, little by little, in this relationship, as it changed, all of my deepest fears came out. And she interpreted this dream in a very different way. For example, the same nightmare. In her reading of it and reading of me, she felt that if when you have a nightmare or a dream, you make it up. So you're really in charge. You're like the director and the writer of a movie. And she pointed out that I was choosing to kill myself. I was also the predator chasing me. By that time, the nightmares had come back, but they were animals chasing me, tigers, murderers. And she pointed out that in her interpretation, I was trying to kill off the part of me that was that dependent child. That's how I learned to survive. I was very high achieving, and you just never, as my mother would always tell me, don't rely on anybody. Don't trust anybody. You rely on yourself. She only had 2 friends I ever knew. And, she was very independent, steely, tough woman. And I got her toughness, but I didn't want to live like that. I wanted to live from the heart and from my feelings of close connection with people. And I saw in this analysis what was blocking that and how I always kept my own distances. And I was trying to kill off the part of me that really wished for closeness and needed people and could trust that they would love me back. And I didn't have that.
What would you say to someone listening right now who's never considered psychoanalysis, or maybe they're afraid that what they might find inside?
I think most people are afraid. I was afraid. But what's so remarkable about the work that an analyst does is they are there. The whole point that they make is this time, looking into those terrible moments, you're not alone. And I'm here every step of the way to help you understand. And here's the most important point. How did that affect you? People think it's about blaming your mother. It's not. It's about whatever happened, how did that affect you? And that's what you need to know. And once you know that and feel genuine compassion for yourself as a little child, you then have compassion for everybody else as well.
Like it's peace, right?
Yes. And I realized my mother was just 26 when all of this happened. I can't hold her responsible for not being a perfect mother. It was certainly unfortunate, but it happened to all 3 of us, my mother, my brother, and myself. We were just in a situation that was too hard to handle. Right. And
you learned
many families.
Her.
Yeah.
Because you understood then that she was doing the best she could when what she was given, right?
And I understood her vulnerabilities and how she had to get tough to toughen herself from her need. She had a husband to depend on, and now she had no one, and her family didn't come through for her. So she was alone, and how she dealt with it, like a lot of people, toughen up. And she was trying to give me her survival skill. And she did. But I didn't want to live like that. And I think that, it's worth it rather than to live a life that maybe you're not living fully. Maybe you don't feel happy. I feel now that what I understand about my own psyche, I can see in other people. So that if you get to know someone, You feel that compassion for them, and you understand their limitations too, and accept them. And that's a whole new attitude for me. And I learned that. I now trust my friends. I'm not so controlling. I have a much better relationship with my daughter. I'm not anxious, and I don't spend the night in nightmares. So that's what my second analysis brought me, a really inner deep peace, freedom, a sense of freedom.
Pretty much nightmares went away because finally your brain says, oh, now we know what happened. We understand. It was almost as if it's like, hey, it was bringing you something to, what about this? What about this? What about this? Because deep in your subconscious, it was something that was not figured out. But the moment you did find out what it was, then it went away. And that has happened to me.
And I would add to that I was more and more getting what my brain needed, the love that I had kept at a distance unknowingly. And so there was more of a release of oxytocin and more dopamine and more of those good chemicals that give you more joy to connect. And now I'm intrigued. How did it happen with you?
How did it happen with me? I have memories of 2 years of age, right? And I have something similar. What you mentioned, my mom was, I always say it, she came from what I call a dysfunctional family in so many ways. So she did what she could to help me. I was the only daughter. And my dad was unfortunately not doing well either. They divorced when I'm 4. And so there's a lot of things that happened when I was 4 years of age. But I was able to make some sense of it. But there were a few things that still stay in my brain that and I did have something, I had a recurring theme, a recurring dream. That one, to be honest with you, I'm kind of curious because that one I haven't figured out yet, but that one is not so bad. But I did have one dream, and that was after actually my mother passed away when I was 17. And the dream it hasn't happened anymore, but the dream was that I will constantly go and call her because we're talking the 1990s, right? And we didn't have phones or cell phones. I mean, I was in Colombia, South America. So you'll kind of go to a place where you make phone calls or like phone call booths and things.
Yeah.
And so I was always calling her and she didn't want to talk to me. She didn't want to talk to me.
This is the dream.
Yeah, this is the dream because she's dead, And so it's like so it's almost as if she's far away and here I am. But when you think about it, to me, in a way, it makes sense. Oh, I need my mother. I'm young. I mean, I'm needing her. I'm needing her advice. I'm trying to call on her, but she's not there. Right. It also makes me curious too, because I did have a therapist for about 6 years. I don't think she was
psychoanalytic.
Exactly. It wasn't like, okay, here, Rosabel, we're going to do an analysis. But then when I think about it, she was able to say, you know what, we think this happened because of this or this or that. Explain to me. And then once that makes sense in my brain, I'm like, I'm no longer having the recurrent dreams. But I never thought it as the way you describe it. Like you were actually engaging. It was more like it was happening. And I was like, okay, it was like a checkbox. Okay, we thought about, okay, check. Check. Yeah. Now I'm thinking like, wow, especially the second analysis that you had when you mentioned that you did a
relational analysis. Yeah.
And then I started thinking about how I interacted with that particular therapist. And it was interesting.
Yeah, there's so much there, right?
Yes.
There's so much there. But they can only really work with how much training they have.
Right.
I had gone to a couple of therapists before my first encounter. I mean, I went to a couple of therapists for my daughter to try and do better with my daughter when I was having trouble with her. They were just interested in problem solving. If you say this, she'll, do that and do this and you'll get that.
That's exactly what we did. We did a lot of problem solving for many years. And then when it was time to like go into the childhood trauma, she's like, I need to refer you to somebody.
That's right.
And I'll be honest with you, I'm still in the process. I'm still looking. I've done a few other things here and there, but I'm still, because we only uncover, it's like a puzzle, right? We only did one part.
That's exactly
It's
right.
like we need to go back and to try to entangle. That is such a great name. Because
Yes.
that's what it is. And you got to
It's like your story is always going to be the same story. You're going to come back to those very elements, but you go deeper each time, deeper, deeper. And there is a bottom. Just listening to you talk about that dream of calling your mother, it brings tears to my eyes because 17 is so young to lose your only parent. I gather your father wasn't.
Friend. No, my father wasn't much very present. I had just turned 17, like 20 days prior. I had just graduated high school. It was, in fact, I wrote a book about it. I also have a book.
Wonderful. I bet that helped you.
Yes. So the book is called The Courage to Succeed. And the message it brings there to other people is like, if I could do it, you could do it. Because I came to the US when I was 22 years of age. Then I have to make myself out of nothing. Like I lost my mom and I literally lost everything. I lost my home. I lost everything that was dear to me, memories, you name it. And so I had to grow up. It was like you said, it's interesting because your book, you see how it's divided into, okay, this is kind of what happened to me in the 20s and next in the 60s, where there's also that division for me, what happened prior with my mother and then after my mom. And it's, and it's still going.
You had to grow up really fast, and you also had to sacrifice your need for a mother. You had to become an adult on your own. And the longing in that phone call is so moving.
But you know what's even interesting? And I can relate so much of what you say with having that understanding of what your mom and all, because from very early age, I understood that she came from a dysfunctional family. So I learned not to have any resentment and so on. My mom she was a child. And I felt for the longest time, there was a lot of burden. There's a lot that was put on my shoulders because I felt the child, I was literally raising my mother.
The other thing the phone call suggests to me when I hear it is that that's like a snapshot, but that the longing for a mother who could mother you may have been there your whole childhood. Right?
But that is so interesting, because now you mentioned that when I came here to the US 15 years ago, actually within a few years, I met at least 2 mother figures. And I had one that did not fully replace my mother, but it became that.
And fabulous.
And I cannot recall if that has something to do when the dreams went away. Sure. But again, the theme was not longer because somehow I felt, unfortunately, my friend, she passed away last year. But when she passed, I felt like I lost my mother again.
But how marvelous that you have the capacity. I mean, and this is psychologically so healthy to find other mother figures who could give you some of what you needed.
Yes. Beautiful. And she understood. Yes, it was beautiful. So all in all, what you're doing and what we're doing here, and this is, again, goes back to the purpose of the podcast. And it's because I believe very much in storytelling. I believe in talking and communication and letting out those things that, like you said at the beginning, kind of like when you were growing up, that we kind of put things under the rug and we don't want to talk about. But it's so, again, the word health comes to mind.
Yeah.
Get those things out, because if you don't, it's like anything, it festers down and it becomes something that it just doesn't serve us well.
That's
you look at our biology and all the new things that we're discovering, for example, the Alzheimer's, the dementias, these things that happen. You see, when we think about people having heart problems, put it that way, and you have cholesterol because there's that plaque that builds up in your veins, and there go to your heart and then stop your heart, and you can have a heart attack. Same thing happens in our brain too. Those plaques that they find later, they're like, well, it could be, we're now thinking this is Alzheimer's, this is a dementia, because it's things that are not being brought to light.
They're not right. Yeah. I believe that too.
Have you come in contact? I talked about this a lot, about a book. It's called The Body Keeps the Score by
Absolutely. I read that again and again. I mean, I felt every page was, oh, that's me.
Keep
No.
reading it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
But you know how he says the body keeps the score? And you know what is taking me to think? The brain keeps the score as well.
Yeah.
The brain.
Yes.
That's where we storage a lot of not just thoughts, but even emotions, right?
Well, and the brain is what tells you, you have a headache, you have a stomach ache, you don't feel right, you want alcohol. It's all of those symptomatic things come
Right.
from the brain's messages to us.
And I don't know if you call it the AC, the childhood adversity score. It's a simple test. And the higher you score, the likelihood of negative impact. And talking about trauma, how do we process the trauma that happened to us? Mostly our trauma comes from childhood, right? We all have different trauma, right? Throughout our life, we're going to have that. But I think the hardest one, like you say, is the one that happens in childhood, because that's the one that, again, our brains are still, like we said earlier.
Well,
And
you're much more vulnerable in childhood. You're dependent
Absolutely.
on people to care for you.
Right.
No.
So this childhood adverse events, I think it's what it's called. Anyways, talking about the trauma brain, or the brain of a person with trauma looks different for sure.
Yeah.
And then, for example, simple things like when somebody's like a workaholic, kind of like me, that's in a way that can be a form of addiction.
I was a
Process trauma in
workaholic.
different-
Yeah.
See, and that was probably our way to cope with what we have gone through. Some people cope by drinking alcohol or doing other things, drugs. And my way of coping has been workaholic. And when we call workaholic is not just at the office, 8 to 5, and just it's actually your home and you detach yourself from your family.
That's right.
And you're always finding things to do because you need to keep your mind busy, because in reality, you're just trying to walk away from that, what's bothering you deep inside.
You're afraid to just be alone. What was it? A writer, Anne Lamott, said, my mind is a really interesting place, but I don't want to be alone there. And it's like that. We have a fear of our own minds,
Right. And what
Right.
we can discover, right?
That's right.
Right.
And
Isn't that
it's
amazing?
scary. Yeah. It's much easier to take a new project and do more things.
Yeah, more in this day and age where there's so much going on, the fast pace. And that's what I was thinking. I wonder how psychoanalysis has something important to say about the pace and the pain of our culture right now.
I think it does, because the message of psychoanalysis is we have to, it's worth it to slow down and know yourself and know what's inside you, even if it means you're not going to be producing as much as your workaholic self, or, you won't be partying and drinking, even if it means your life will be transformed. If you feel better as a person, you can bring so much joy and love and stability to other people. So it pays forward. It's just for you. It's for your children.
It feels like exactly about a legacy that you can leave to your children, but it also, what comes to mind is quality versus quantity.
Very
It's
much.
about working, not so much working a lot, but working smart, doing things that benefit not only us as a person, but also our families and our future generations.
Yeah.
Because we need to be mindful of that. What are we going to leave?
Yeah. And we need to know that every person that we're in contact with feels who we are. And if we're angry and gnarled and difficult and needy, we're going to be spreading that. And that doesn't help in the social sphere.
When did you publish your book?
In February.
Okay, this year. Perfect. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Beautiful, beautiful title. Is there anything I have not asked you that you're like, I really need to get that out there and talk?
Well, I have one practical suggestion. Most people have every right to say, well, who can afford psychoanalysis? It costs a fortune. I mean, I was lucky. I got a psychoanalyst in training, but you can get that. Most cities have institutes where they teach psychoanalysis. Somebody's already a psychologist and they want to go for the psychoanalytic certificate. And they are being trained and they need clients to practice on. And you can be one of those. And that's possible. Medicare and Medicaid. And it's always worth, and you can easily find out who these people are through Find a Therapist at Psychology Today. Psychology Today offers that service. You can find a
Right.
therapist and they're verified, their data and so on. So that's how I found my analyst is
Very
on this
fancy.
site. So I would just throw that out there, that it really is a little more available than people think. And all I can say is it is so worth it for you and your family and your friends.
Yes. Joan, how can people get in touch with you? How can they get their book? Do you have a website?
I do have a
Okay.
website and it's called untanglingjoan.com. And it has all the interviews and my writing. I blog for Psychology Today. So I always have a new blog every month. And you can even contact me through my website. And I love to have people do that. And yeah, I think that's everything.
And your book is on
Amazon
Amazon. Okay.
and Barnes and Nobles, and
Yeah.
it's on Kindle.
Go to
You're right.
Goodreads or anywhere and write
That's
something
right. Yes.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Whatever it is. Exactly. Because that's how authors are found. The message is spread. So I
That's
always
true.
encourage
Right.
us to do. Joan, it's been such a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much for your insight, the wisdom, all of this story. I mean, I wish, oh my goodness, there's so much to talk. You're welcome to come back after the show. Maybe you have another story or something else, or maybe a second book.
I do. And I also have a lot more stories.
For sure. Well, thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll see you again in another episode of Rosabel Unscripted. Take care.
Wonderful. I appreciate it. Thank you.
If this episode spoke to you, if it sparked a thought, a feeling, or a shift, I invite you to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss an episode. Visit www.rosabelzohfeld.com. Here on Rosabel Unscripted, we dive deep into real stories, mindful moments, and conversations that matter. Every week, we explore themes like resilience, healing, transformation, and the courage to rewrite your own story. So if you're ready to grow, reflect, and walk this journey with an open heart, hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's keep the conversation going. There are new episodes every week.